Welcome to this pre-launch feature demonstration for LSRP's drug system, accurate as of May 2023. In this video, we'll tell you what sorts of drugs are featured in the game and their effects, how drugs appear in the inventory, how different drugs are actually used, how the drugs can be traded with other players, some initial plans for how drugs will make it into the server, and what the drug economy will look like. Throughout this video, we'll also touch on what some of the future plans could be for the drug system as we go along. First of all, let's take a look at the different types of drugs that will be featured in the game at launch. Just to reiterate, there is likely to be more added in the future. We have my character here, Allegra, who's about to check out what sort of drugs she's got on her today. To do this, all we have to do is hit the I button and open up the inventory. And as you can see, she's got all sorts. Each of these drugs in the current version causes different cosmetic or visual effects. As of the current build, there are very few direct gameplay benefits, but this may change as the system expands and depending on community feedback. I'll give you a brief introduction to each of the drugs. On the illegal side, we have got cocaine, marijuana, crack, heroin, meth, and shrooms. Each of them causes a visual effect, but cocaine is worth a mention on its own right now, because it actually lowers the effects of alcohol. As we'll cover in a separate feature demo, consuming alcohol can cause the screen to shake, and therefore consuming cocaine is an effective way of countering this. Legalized drugs include paracetamol, oxycodone, alprazolam, if I'm pronouncing that right, and diazepam. Legal drugs are where there are more functions currently in play. These relate closely to our brutally wounded system. Essentially, if your character is brutally wounded and then revived by a medic from the FD, your health will be capped at 50 points for a certain period of time. To counter this, you can take painkillers. Paracetamol increases the cap by 15 points, and oxycodone increases it by 30 points. Note, however, that these changes are temporary, so your character will need to keep on ingesting them. Alprazolam and diazepam have a slightly different use, in that they can be used to counter the effects of other drugs in your system. For instance, if you're finding that you're genuinely tripping too much from the shrooms, you can take either alprazolam or diazepam to calm down the visual effect. So, let's now take a look at how to actually use these drugs as your character. It's fairly simple, really. We'll start with cocaine. So, to use this drug, I simply click on it in the inventory. I then have the option here to use it. So, we'll click this now. This then brings up the option of, essentially, how much do you want to use? As you can see, she's got a fair bit. She's got 10 grams of cocaine. So, we'll take a regular amount. This will sometimes trigger an animation depending on what the drug is, for instance lighting a spliff, but in this instance it triggers an in-character notification that my character has snorted cocaine. You'll see in a couple of minutes as this video goes on that the screen will start to change, indicating that my character is under the effect of drugs. This is an important thing to note, not all drugs kick in immediately. Just like in the real world, there are different onset times for effects, and likewise different tapering times for how long these effects last. Let's try something else. Let's try shrooms. So this drug will cause a fairly obvious visual effect on the screen, which is designed to mimic the symptoms of a psychedelic drug, essentially. However, its onset time is slightly longer. So there we go, Allegra Nixon just ate some shrooms. However, you can see now that the visual effect from the cocaine is starting to set in. There's a little bit of a sort of flashing filter on the screen. Now, of course, drug consumption is only one element of the system. A huge part of illegal roleplay is going to be drug dealing and distribution. Trading drugs between players is very simple to do with the inventory system. All we need to do is find the item's ID in the inventory, which is the little number next to its name. And then we need to know the player's ID, and in some cases their name will work too. And the command that we need to do this is /item, then the inventory slot, then the word give, and finally the player ID. So let's give this a go now. you can see Swenson receives this offer from me, and there we go, he's just accepted it. Now you'll see that the whole stack of cocaine went there, so if you wanted to only give him a little bit of it, you can use the button to split, which is just here. And that's it, that's how you trade drugs. Now, I've skipped ahead here by a good few minutes, and you can see that the effect from the shrooms has finally kicked in. This has taken quite a while though, so it's just something to bear in mind. Certain drugs do have a longer onset time. But what about legal drugs like paracetamol and oxycodone? Paracetamol can be purchased at pharmacies and 24/7s. For the stronger painkillers and their more effective counter to the health cap, however, your character will need to get a prescription from an authorised individual in the FD. Once you have this, you can head over to a pharmacy, use the command /RX, and turn in your prescription for the drugs. My character doesn't have a prescription at the moment, but what I can show you is what this looks like on the MDC. As you can see, there's quite a few parameters here which dictate how often the character will be able to redeem these pills. You'll also notice that there are a few drugs that we haven't covered yet. These will be implemented in a future update. Of course, if you'd rather not go down the legal route of trying to attain a prescription, there will no doubt be an illegal economy for these drugs available if your character decides to go down that route. While we're on the topic of the MDC, I can show you how drug testing will look. Essentially, there are different tests for different drugs, and this is how it will show up on the MDC. Now, there are a few things to cover on this system and are expected questions with it at launch. First of all, how are drugs going to make it into the server in the first place? Well, there's going to be a drug scheme in place managed by the faction team, and this will include a specific feature that is worthy of a video on its own called the Dark Net. In a nutshell, however, this will be a feature made exclusive to certain individuals or factions and acts as a drugs wholesaler, where dealers can essentially place an order and receive it at their property at a time later in that day. At this point, there isn't the ability to grow or manufacture your own drugs, but no doubt this will come in future iterations of the system. The drug economy itself is going to be mostly dictated by supply and demand, but naturally there will be a cost for the dealers to acquire the drugs in the first place, so they'll likely want to price themselves in such a way that they ensure they make a profit. Finally, just another reminder that this is just the first iteration of the drug system, and as with all the systems, we'll be constantly updating them based on player feedback and interaction with them. As this is our launch phase, consider this as the absolute bare bones of the drug system, and naturally it's going to get better over time. Remember, for the most up-to-date information on the drug system, be sure to check out the feature documentation section on the forums or the wiki. Thanks for listening. I hope you found this feature demo useful.